Okay, be honest. Have you ever met someone a little too into themselves?
Oh yeah, definitely.
Right. Or like wondered why some families, I don't know, just seem to constantly be like butting heads.
Hmm.
Well, today we are diving deep into the world of Vedic astrology
Ooh.
to explore the like very human mysteries. And thanks to a really interesting podcast called Cosmic Connections.
Cosmic connections, yeah. What's I think really cool about Vedic astrology is that it offers like a completely unique framework for understanding these patterns we see,
Yeah.
like in ourselves and others, and even in like families. It's not like, fortune telling, predicting the future. It's more like a psychological lens to kind of interpret these tendencies and behaviors that can sometimes leave us, scratching our head.
Oh, I love that. A psychological lens.
Yeah.
So Cosmic Connections kicks things off with narcissism. And
Yes.
apparently it's not just about being self-absorbed, right?
Yeah.
There's an astrological angle to it.
That's right, yeah. So in Vedic astrology, the sun represents our like core sense of self, ego. So imagine like the first house of the birth chart, like the stage of your life. And if you have a really powerful sun shining brightly in that first house, which is all about, identity, it's like you're naturally drawn to that spotlight,
Ah.
always seeking validation and applause.
So it's not like just a choice that someone chooses to be narcissistic, right? It's like this deeper, like, need for attention that's, I don't know, almost woven into their, like, cosmic fabric.
Yeah, exactly. Woven into their cosmic fabric. And it's, not just the first house, the sun's influence in the fourth house, which represents like home and family, or the 10th house of career and public image.
Mhm.
It can also amplify these tendencies. Like this need for recognition just permeates different areas of their life.
This is already blowing my mind.
Yeah.
But Cosmic Connections doesn't stop there.
No.
They also mention how Mars and Venus can kind of add fuel to the narcissistic fire.
Absolutely. Yeah, so Mars is all about drive and action. So a strong Mars influence might make someone like impulsive, argumentative, always needing to be right.
Right.
Like think of that friend who can never admit they're wrong.
Yeah. Okay.
That's Mars.
Got it. Okay, and what about Venus? I thought Venus was about love and beauty. How does it play into narcissism?
Well, imagine Venus as like the ultimate stylist, obsessed with appearances.
Oh, okay.
So if Venus is strongly influencing that sun, they might become fixated on their looks, their social status, and creating this perfectly curated image for the world, often neglecting kind of deeper emotional connections.
Wow, that's fascinating.
Yeah.
So even without knowing anything about Vedic astrology, you can kind of start to see how these planetary combinations could, like create those classic like narcissistic patterns we see.
Yeah, absolutely. Like even without knowing kind of the specifics of Vedic astrology, you can look at these archetypes and be
Uh-huh.
like, "Oh, okay, that makes sense."
Totally.
It's all about recognizing those tendencies, both in ourselves and others.
Right.
It's not about like labeling people or making excuses, but rather like gaining a deeper understanding of what might be driving those behaviors.
Okay. That was a lot to take in, but Cosmic Connections also tackles another kind of juicy topic,
Yes.
lying. And I have to admit, I was pretty skeptical about this one
Yeah.
at first.
It's one of those like eyebrow raising topics for sure,
Mm.
but Vedic astrology offers a really unique perspective. It suggests that for some people, habitual lying might not be like a conscious choice, but rather a consequence of how their planet Mercury is positioned in their birth chart.
Hold on. Mercury, like the planet. What does that have to do with telling, like little white lies?
Well, Mercury is all about communication and how
Yeah.
we process information. The third house in the Vedic chart also governs communication. So if Mercury happens to be like poorly placed, let's say being influenced by a shadowy planet like Rahu.
Rahu, that sounds intense.
It is.
What's Rahu all about?
Think of Rahu as like a cosmic trickster, like a shadowy figure who distorts our perceptions. So when Rahu influences Mercury, it's like their ability to kind of discern truth from falsehood becomes a bit fuzzy.
So they're not necessarily lying on purpose. It's more like their reality is like slightly skewed.
Exactly. It's like they genuinely believe what they're saying, even if it's not entirely accurate.
Oh, wow.
Cosmic Connections gave a great example. Imagine someone with this Mercury Rahu influence telling, like, a small white lie. even when there's no need.
Right.
It's not malicious. It's more like their internal compass is a bit off.
That is so wild. And it really makes you think twice about, judging someone for being dishonest.
Right.
Because maybe there are, deeper forces at play.
It's definitely food for thought. How often do we assume malicious intent when it might be a matter of like distorted perception? Or, as Vedic astrology suggests, a tricky planetary combination.
Right.
Yeah.
My brain is officially exploding.
Kinda.
This is why I love these deep dives. You just never know what kind of mind-bending insights you're going to uncover.
Yeah.
And speaking of mind-bending, Cosmic Connections doesn't shy away from tackling family dynamics.
No.
Especially within Indian families.
Interesting.
They talk about how this culture of comparison can kind of breed selfishness and ego.
Yeah. It's a fascinating observation. And Vedic astrology offers, again, a unique perspective on this. So the 7th house in the birth chart represents relationships.
Right.
And Mars, as we mentioned, is all about drive and competition. So imagine these two combined. It's like viewing life as this constant race to the finish line.
So it's not just about individual ambition. It's almost baked into this kind of astrological blueprint of some families.
In a way, yeah. And Cosmic Connections highlights how this can be particularly potent in Indian families, where societal expectations, especially for women, can further fuel this need to constantly compare oneself to others.
Right.
It can be about achievements, material possessions, even finding the perfect spouse. It's it can manifest in all these different ways.
It's everyone's trying to kind of outdo each other, even within the family unit.
Yeah.
And I bet Rahu probably makes an appearance here, too.
Oh, of course. Rahu, never too far behind.
Mm-hmm.
Rahu with this, tendency to amplify desires.
Right.
It can really supercharge those materialistic urges, especially when influencing the 7th house of relationships or, the 4th house, which represents home and family.
Right. So it's Rahu's whispering in their ear, you need more. You need to be better. You need to win.
Yeah, constantly. More, more, more.
Right.
And it's a reminder that even if you're not from an Indian background, we all experience this pressure to compare ourselves to others in some way.
Oh, yeah.
Whether it's on social media, at work, or even within our own families.
Totally.
That constant need to measure up.
It's this universal human struggle, but Vedic astrology gives us a new lens to kind of understand those underlying forces.
Right. That might be driving it.
That's the beauty of this system. It's
Right.
not about blaming the stars, but rather using those insights to navigate these challenges with more awareness and compassion.
Totally. Okay.
Yeah.
So we've talked about narcissism, lying, this whole comparison culture thing. But what about those classic family dynamics? The rebellious teenager
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
and the overprotective parent. Cosmic Connections dives into those too, right?
They do. And Vedic astrology offers some pretty interesting perspectives on these kind of age-old struggles. Let's start with the rebellious teenager. So remember how we talked about the 5th house representing creativity and self-expression? Well, imagine a teenager with a strong 5th house influence.
Right.
They're just bursting with ideas and passions and a desire to break free from convention.
So far, so good. But then things get a little tricky. Yeah, exactly. Because the 10th house, which is all about authority and structure, often comes into play here. And if there's tension between these two houses, especially involving Saturn, the planet of discipline and limitations, sparks can fly.
Okay, remind me. Saturn is the one who's all about the rules and restrictions.
That's him. All about rules and restrictions.
Oh.
So you've got this creative, rebellious energy from the 5th house clashing with the need for order and control from the 10th house, often fueled by kind of a strict Saturn influence. It's like a recipe for teenage angst.
So it's not just hormones and teenage mood swings.
Not just that.
There's a cosmic battle happening in their birth chart.
You could say that, yeah. And Cosmic Connections, the podcast, give a great example. Imagine a teenager who dreams of being a musician, but whose parents are pushing them towards a more traditional career path.
Right.
That friction between their creative aspirations and kind of societal expectations, as seen through this astrological lens, it can lead to some pretty epic clashes.
And of course, we can't forget about Rahu.
Of course not.
I have a feeling he loves to stir the pot in these situations.
Oh, absolutely. Rahu can definitely amplify that rebellious energy, making the teenager even more determined to, assert their independence, sometimes in dramatic or even destructive ways.
It's like Rahu's the ultimate hype man
Yeah.
for teenage rebellion.
He is the ultimate hype man. But, what's important to remember is that this perspective doesn't excuse bad behavior. It's about understanding kind of the underlying dynamics, both astrological and psychological, that might be contributing to those conflicts.
So instead of just getting frustrated with your, angsty teen, maybe you can take a step back and be like, okay, their chart is showing some serious fifth house, 10th house tension.
Right.
Maybe we need to find a more constructive outlet for their creativity.
Exactly. It's about finding that balance between nurturing their individuality and setting healthy boundaries.
Okay. All right. Let's switch gears now and talk about kind of the other side of the coin.
Yes.
The overprotective parent. Cosmic Connections mentions that the moon plays a big role here, right?
The moon, yes, absolutely. So the moon represents our emotions, our nurturing instincts, and how we kind of care for others. And a strong moon in the fourth house, which is all about home and family, can manifest as this deep, almost all-consuming desire to protect and care for one's children.
I can already picture those parents who just live and breathe for their kids.
Right, right.
Constantly worrying about every little thing.
Exactly, yeah. And while that dedication is admirable, Cosmic Connection suggests that sometimes this strong kind of lunar influence can create an imbalance.
Okay.
The parent might struggle to set healthy boundaries, prioritize their own needs, or even allow their child to kind of experience life's natural challenges.
It's like they want to wrap their kid in bubble wrap.
Yes.
And shield them from any potential harm.
That's a perfect analogy, yeah. And Venus, the planet of love and affection, can further amplify this tendency towards overprotectiveness, especially if it's strongly aspecting that fourth house.
So it's not that these parents are trying to stifle their kids. It's coming from a place of love, but maybe that love is a little, I don't know, overwhelming.
Yeah, a little too much, exactly. And Cosmic Connections give a great example. Imagine a parent with this kind of strong Moon-Venus influence, struggling to let their child make their own mistakes.
Right.
Or navigate kind of difficult situations independently. They're constantly hovering, offering unsolicited advice, jumping in to, fix things.
Yeah, it's that classic helicopter parent scenario. But seeing it through this astrological lens gives you a whole new level of, understanding and empathy.
It does. It does. And it's not about judging or blaming. It's about recognizing those patterns, how those planetary influences might be contributing to them.
So for a listener who might be dealing with an overprotective parent, this could be a real aha moment, right?
Yeah.
They might realize, hey, it's not just my mom being controlling. Maybe it's that powerful moon in her fourth house,
Right.
making her feel like she needs to, shield me from the world.
It's about shifting from blame to understanding.
Totally.
And that understanding can pave the way for more compassionate and constructive conversations.
This is so good. Now, Cosmic Connections also delves into a topic that's particularly relevant in, many cultures, including Indian families.
Yeah.
The pressure to get married.
Ah, yes. Matrimony mania, as they call it.
Right.
It's a fascinating area to explore. And Vedic astrology offers, again, a unique perspective on this. In this case, Jupiter, the planet of expansion and wisdom, takes center stage.
Jupiter. I thought Jupiter was all about good luck and abundance. How does that tie into marriage pressure?
Well, imagine Jupiter's expansive energy, focused on the second house, which represents, family and wealth, or the seventh house, which governs marriage and partnerships.
Right.
It can create this intense desire to expand one's family lineage, often with an emphasis on social status and material compatibility.
So it's not just about finding love, right? It's about finding the right kind of partner, someone who meets kind of certain social or financial criteria.
That's right, yeah. And Cosmic Connections highlights how this can manifest in cultures where arranged marriages are common.
Right.
There's often a really strong emphasis on finding a partner who kind of aligns with the family's values and aspirations, sometimes prioritizing those external factors over individual choice or genuine connection.
And I bet Rahu loves to get involved in these situations too, right?
Oh, he is never too far behind. Rahu can amplify those materialistic desires, making individuals and families even more fixated on finding a partner who kind of checks all the boxes, often overlooking those intangible qualities like emotional compatibility or shared values.
Yeah, it's like Rahu's whispering, bigger, better, richer. Make sure they have, the right pedigree and the hefty bank accounts.
Exactly. Bigger is always better.
Right.
And cosmic connections makes, I think, a really important point here. Even if you're not from a culture where like arranged marriages are prevalent, that pressure to conform to kind of societal expectations around marriage is something I think a lot of people can relate to.
Totally. It's like that universal feeling of, am I doing this right? Am I meeting the deadlines? Am I on track with what everyone else is doing?
Yeah. Am I keeping up with the Joneses?
Yeah.
Exactly.
Right, exactly.
And it's a really valuable reminder to examine kind of those pressures, whether they're coming from our families, our culture, or even our own internalized beliefs.
Okay, we've covered a lot of ground here. Narcissism, lying, comparison culture, rebellious teenagers, overprotective parents, the pressure to get married. Who knew? Vedic astrology had so much to say about these, everyday challenges.
It's pretty amazing. And what's so fascinating is that Vedic astrology connects these seemingly disparate themes through this kind of intricate system of planets, houses, and kind of their interactions.
Just having this like cosmic decoder ring for
Yeah.
understanding human behavior.
Yeah, I love that. Like this, cosmic decoder ring. And what's empowering about it is that this knowledge isn't about like blaming the stars or feeling like we're at the mercy of fate. It's about using those insights to make more conscious choices
Right.
and navigate kind of those challenges with greater awareness.
Right. It's not a crystal ball, but rather like a roadmap
Right.
for understanding ourselves
Yeah.
and those around us.
Mhm.
Okay, so we've basically journeyed through like this cosmos of Vedic astrology
Right.
with cosmic connections as like our guide.
Yeah.
We've explored kind of how planetary influences can like shed light on, I don't know, everything from like narcissistic tendencies to like family dynamics, even like the pressure to get married.
It's a lot.
It's been a lot.
It's a lot to take in.
But, the question I'm left with is like, is this really about destiny? Are we all just, puppets dancing to the tune of our birth charts?
Oh, that's a great question. And it's one that comes up a lot when, discussing astrology.
Right.
So Vedic astrology, definitely emphasizes the influence of planetary energies on our lives.
Right.
But it also recognizes like the power of free will. It's not about predestination, but rather like predisposition.
So our birth charts are like a cosmic blueprint.
Yeah.
Highlighting kind of our strengths and challenges, potential tendencies.
Again, tendencies. Yeah.
But ultimately, we have the power to choose how we respond to those influences.
Exactly. You're not just like a puppet. You have agency. You can make choices.
Yeah.
It's like having a map that shows you like different routes.
Mm-hmm.
The map doesn't force you to take a particular path, but it kind of gives you valuable information to help you navigate the journey.
I love that. So even if, like, someone has a chart that suggests a tendency toward, narcissism,
Yeah.
they're not, like, doomed to be a self-absorbed jerk
Right.
forever.
Right, exactly. You can work with these energies.
They can choose to kind of work on those tendencies, develop their empathy, and cultivate, like, more balanced relationships.
Exactly, exactly. And the same goes for like any challenging planetary combination. Awareness is key.
Right.
By understanding those influences, we can start to make more kind of conscious choices and break free from those patterns that might be holding us back.
Okay. That's empowering.
Yeah.
But let's be honest, sometimes those patterns feel so ingrained,
Right.
like so deeply rooted
Yeah.
in our personalities.
Totally.
Is it really possible to like change those core tendencies, even with like astrological awareness?
Well, it's definitely not always easy,
Right.
but it is possible. Think about it. We're not like static beings, right?
Right.
We're constantly kind of evolving and growing. And Vedic astrology provides kind of tools to help us understand ourselves better and kind of work with those energies more effectively.
Okay.
It's like having a personal trainer for your soul.
I'm sold. Sign me up for soul training. But seriously, where does like someone even begin? If a listener is intrigued by all this and wants to explore their own Vedic birth chart, what would you suggest?
Well, there are so many resources available these days. There are books, websites, even apps that can like generate your Vedic birth chart and provide kind of basic interpretations. But if you really want to like dive deep, I recommend finding a qualified Vedic astrologer.
Right.
They can offer like personalized insights and guidance based on your unique chart.
That makes sense. But I have to ask, like, how do you even know if a Vedic astrologer is like legit? There's a lot of, shall we say, astrology adjacent folks out there.
Yeah, That's a really good point. Unfortunately, like any field, there are people who might not be as, qualified or ethical as others.
Right.
So do your research, look for astrologers who have like solid credentials, positive testimonials, and most importantly, who resonate with you on a personal level.
Okay.
Astrology is a deeply personal journey,
Right.
so it's essential to find someone you trust and feel comfortable with.
Great advice. And, even if like someone's not ready to like jump into the whole Vedic astrology thing, I think this deep dive has offered some like valuable takeaways
Totally.
for anyone who's ever felt baffled by human behavior.
Oh, absolutely. Whether you're like fascinated by the cosmos or just kind of curious about what makes people tick,
Right.
Vedic astrology offers like a really unique and thought-provoking lens for understanding ourselves and those around us.
And even if like you don't believe in any of it, it's a pretty entertaining way to kind of think about like those age-old questions
Right.
about love, family, the mysteries of the universe.
Absolutely. Yeah, it's all about like expanding our perspectives
All right.
and finding new ways to connect with the human experience.
Well, on that note, we'll wrap up this cosmic adventure. We hope you've enjoyed this deep dive into the world of Vedic astrology. We'll catch you next time for another fascinating exploration into the topics that make you think and wonder and maybe even question, like everything you thought you knew. Until then, happy stargazing.